We're here at Sonoma Raceway, or Infineon, or Sears Point, whatever you want to call it, and we have the new Audi RS5. And I think you can see where this is going. Only this isn't the new RS5. This car has been on sale in Europe for some time now, but this is the first time it's available in the US, so just consider it new to us. So we've done some limit driving around Sonoma Raceway with the RS5, and we're going to come down a bit and talk about what we've learned. So what is the RS5? Well, it's a fast Audi, so it has the typical hardware, all-wheel drive, twin-clutch transmission, but that stuff is, interestingly, mated to a 450 horsepower V8 and a torque vectoring rear differential. That's the ticket right there. The great thing about this V8, although its displacement is 4.2 liters, and that sounds like a familiar engine in the Audi family, this one is all new. It likes to rev. Peak power comes in at 8,250 RPM, and you can redline at 8,500 RPM. Peak torque is about 4,000 RPM, so you have this meaty 4,000 RPM power band to play with when you're on the track. The other thing I really like about these new performance-oriented Audis is the torque vectoring differential in the rear. It biases power left and right between the tires, always giving more power to the outside rear wheel, multiplying the torque. And that means when you're mid-corner and you want to turn it sharper, you just add more throttle and the car rotates more. It's kind of a weird experience at first, but when you get used to it, it becomes a lot of fun. Now, how does it feel around Sonoma Raceway? Well, it's very, very capable. You can tell that just after a few turns. There is a ton of grip everywhere on track, thanks in part to the all-wheel drive, thanks in part to the massive tires, and thanks in part to the very smart traction control systems and electronic stabilization programs this thing has going on. You can kind of sense that there's a wall of engineering and electronics just to make sure that you always get everything right when you drive this car quickly, and it works very well. The highlight of this powertrain, though, is the twin clutch transmission. It gives you such excellent control over this engine. It's exactly what you want on this kind of powertrain. When you're dealing with so many revs and so much power, you want extra control. Would this car be better with a manual? I don't think so. The RS5 is in a pretty competitive set of cars. You have the M3 Coupe, you have the C63, and you have the CTSV to a lesser extent. What does this have over it? Well, it's actually pretty similar in weight despite having the front wheels driven as well as the rear. It has better fuel economy in all of those. This car doesn't actually get a gas guzzler tax like some of the other cars in this class. And it's all-wheel drive, so that means it might be better in inclement weather situations. Is it as sharp of a driver's tool as some of those cars? Well, you kind of have to drive them back to back to be sure. I'm not getting the feedback I want through the steering, that's for sure, although I can tell this is a highly, highly capable car.
The best part about these German sports cars isn't how well they perform on a racetrack, it's that they make for excellent touring cars as well. That sounds like an excuse for us to take a long drive.
Now this is the kind of road trip we live for. Nowhere to go, all day to get there, and 450 horsepower to guide us on the way. Speaking of the engine, I really admire Audi for putting in such a high-revving V8 into this RS5. It's kind of going against what the rest of the manufacturers are doing right now. Everybody's doing smaller displacement, forced induction, torque-heavy motors, but this isn't that at all. It doesn't have much torque. We only have 317 pound-feet to play with. Sometimes it takes a couple beats for the transmission to downshift and for the revs to climb up for you to actually get some appreciable power. But when it does, it's absolutely thrilling. Audi has done quite a bit of work with fuel economy, and the best example of it is this 7-speed twin-clutch transmission. It works wonderfully on the racetrack. Fast, you barely notice it except for the sound you get out of the exhaust pipes. And then on the road, you leave it in automatic mode, and you barely even notice that it's shifting. It's so smooth and so precise. And then when you want to have some fun, you slip it over to manual mode, and it gives you the finest control over this engine. It's between the engine and the transmission, I'm having a hard time deciding which part is my favorite. Speaking of the racetrack, this suspension worked very nicely out there. It was pretty much all you could ask for in a car like this. But then you get on the road and the lack of adjustability really becomes apparent. This car rides stiff. You get it over broken pavement, over grades in the road. It just sort of vibrates and shakes and has some pretty harsh impacts when you get down to it. On the adjustability side, Audi gives you a lot of options, perhaps too much, depending on what you option with the car, whether you get adaptive steering, whether you get adaptive cruise control. You can have as many as 5 different things to adjust in the Audi Drive Select. We don't have active steering and we don't have active cruise control, so I can still control the engine and transmission, how aggressively it shifts, the sound it makes when you accelerate. I can adjust how much resistance I want in the steering and how aggressive the sport differential is. Now, I like being able to do the differential, but the steering I can never quite get to a point I like. It's either too heavy or too light, and it doesn't really give the feedback that I want out of a driver's car. That is to say, it's precise enough to do what this car does. I just want a little bit more feedback. Now, but like the 20-inch wheels, like the sunroof, this thing is loaded with luxury features. I mean, of course we have heated seats, of course they're buckets, of course they're wrapped in leather, and it's all very nice to use. We also have MMI, which integrates Google Maps and Google Street View. And there's also voice commands that will actually do Google searches to find stuff around you as points of interest. It's very, very nice suite of features. You have a rear spoiler that deploys automatically at 75 miles an hour and then retracts again at 55. So that's actually a pretty good telltale for the local authorities. When it comes to a road trip, there's nothing quite like a fast German sedan. The seats are supportive, the engine is always powerful, and it's just a nice travel companion with all its luxury features and whatnot.
So while the RS5 isn't going to set any benchmarks and limit handling finesse or driver involvement, it remains a special car, particularly due to that wonderful screaming V8. Reaching for redline is a thrilling feat regardless of whether you're on the track or cruising along the coast. Audi is going to send just 1,500 RS5s to the US in the next 2 to 3 years. That's an astonishingly low figure, but a hope that high-revving, naturally aspirated V8s won't end up on the endangered powertrain species list anytime soon.